Let's get straight to the news. Former Vice President Mike Pence offering his sharpest criticism yet of former President Donald Trump over the January 6th insurrection. Pence made the remarks on Saturday at the annual Gridiron Dinner, a closed-door, off-camera event attended by politicians and journalists in the nation's capital. Speeches at that event usually take a humorous tone, where politicians poke fun at each other, but people at the dinner reported the tone turned serious when Pence turned to January 6th. Pence said, in part, quote, "President Trump was wrong. I had no right to overturn the election, and his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day. And I know history will hold Donald Trump accountable." He continued, quote, "Make no mistake about it. What happened that day was a disgrace, and it mocks decency to portray it any other way." Okay. We will note that despite those comments, Pence has so far refused to testify under oath. But okay, so history will hold him accountable, right, but nobody will right now. Well, what is he saying?
I mean, he's saying he's not going to testify under oath before all the investigative bodies that are trying to actually hold Donald Trump accountable for those things that Mike Pence
refused
said.
To testify.
He did.
Before the January 6th committee, saying publicly that the committee had, quote, no right to his testimony. But the Gridiron Dinner was. Okay. He currently is fighting a subpoena to testify in connection with the special counsel Jack Smith's federal investigation into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, as well as the former president's mishandling of classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Well, very interesting.
Well, and this is more of the same, Mika, where we saw Kevin McCarthy scream to Donald Trump on January 6th to stop the rioters. They were his people, and it was all on him. We saw him go to the House floor the next day and do it. You have these Republicans that want to have it both ways. Listen, I'm very glad Mike Pence said what Mike Pence said at the Gridiron. It is there. It now is in the history books, and we know about it. But
at a comedy dinner?
I mean, really? I don't understand why they can't just tell the American people the truth. Just talking to the camera and tell them the truth. I know that's not in vogue right now at a lot of networks. I know that's not in vogue for a lot of politicians. I should say for a lot of cable news hosts at other networks. But when you want to hear the truth about Donald Trump from top Republicans these days, you just can't expect to hear it in the light of day. Instead, maybe some will say it in whispered off-the-record conversations with reporters or in cloakroom screeds where Donald Trump is dismissed with contempt as a liar or a loser or a cancer on his party. Or maybe you may hear it from Mike Pence, but only when he's off camera at the Gridiron Club. And like all of these Republicans that attack Donald Trump off the record, but won't say the truth about him on the record, on camera, the former vice president wants to have it both ways, telling the truth about a man who threatened his life and his family's life, but not actually saying it on TV, or Charlie Sykes to the very investigative committees and investigators that could hold him accountable for this extraordinarily terrible behavior that Mike Pence himself is now condemning in the harshest words.
Well, it was profiles in half courage, wasn't it? Which we've gotten used to from Mike Pence, And the irony, of course, is that this is why he has zero chance of winning the Republican nomination. Despite all of this, he got a standing ovation from many members of the club, I understand. But there's probably no focus group that's less representative of the Republican voters right now than the media crowd in Washington, D.C. So he's willing to go halfway. He's not willing to testify. But the fact that he is willing to call out Donald Trump, that he is willing to talk about decency in relationship to what happened on January 6th, is the reason why he is disqualified as a Republican nominee, because this is the Republican Party. This is the Republican base. You think, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, this is the former vice president of the United States. Why is he not one of the front runners? And why is there no prospect at all that he's going to end up with this nomination? And it's because he was willing to go halfway and condemn Donald Trump. But now he's in this no man's land where he's condemned Donald Trump, so he's going to be cast out by the MAGA-verse. And yet he's not willing to testify. He is not willing to have the courage of his own convictions when it comes to denouncing this. So it's 1.5 cheers, but ultimately sort of pathetic.
Again, so glad he said it, but you're right. Very sad he can't say it on camera. And Jen Psaki, let's just forget about what's right and what's wrong in terms of this conversation about Mike Pence. And let's just talk about what helps you win elections and what helps you lose elections. There's no guarantee that if he actually tells the truth about Donald Trump and is strong and goes aggressive on the campaign trail, that he'll win. But we all know this. You can't be halfway in. You can't have 1 foot in the water and 1 foot out of the water. That guarantees a loss, and that's what all these people are doing right now. You look at Nikki Haley, who said, I'm not going to criticize Donald Trump. I'm not going to say anything bad about him because he hasn't said anything bad about me. Really? Right. The guy has been attacking Nikki Haley, even attacking her complexion, just like these vicious, horrible personal attacks against her. And a couple weeks later, she said, Donald Trump's not attacking me, so why would I ever say anything bad about him? Again, let's forget about what's right, what's wrong, what's courageous, what's not courageous. That's just bad politics.
I agree. I mean, one, you can't win a presidential election in a primary even, or certainly in a general, by being inauthentic. And that's what we're seeing from a lot of these candidates. It's like, who are you and what do you actually think? That's important no matter what political party you are. The second piece is you also don't win by pretending that the guy who's leading is going to just go away. I mean, we've seen him go down in polls in Iowa and other places, but that's because of excitement maybe about Ron DeSantis and others. It's not really about Nikki Haley at this point, and it's not really about Mike Pence either. The other thing, Joe, I was at that dinner on Saturday night, and it was strange, I will say. I mean, because it was about 9:30 at night in a dark basement ballroom. Everybody's wearing black tie or white tails, which is very strange. There's not many dinners left that still do that. And that's when he decided to give his strongest comments. Now, it is true also that he got largely a standing ovation from the room. He had some good jokes. Then he gave a very powerful, what I thought was a powerful case in the moment. But to the point everybody's been raising, why there? What are you going to do now? And what role are you actually going to play in getting to the bottom of what happened to prevent it from happening again in history?
Yeah. Right. And Mika, all these Republicans need to do is look back at Donald Trump. When Donald Trump first got in the race, he knew he had to take out Jeb. Jeb was way ahead of everybody. He had hundreds of millions of dollars. There was no way Jeb Bush was going to lose to Donald Trump. That's what everybody was saying. So what did he do? He went after low-energy Jeb and hammered him every day. And on a very small level, I know the same thing. I started out 30, 40 points behind in my race, and I knew I had to keep punching up and just bait them to come after me. And eventually they did. You can't just, when you're as far behind as Mike Pence and Nikki Haley and most of these other Republicans, you can't just sit back and pretend that the guy that's leading the pack is a nice guy, especially if he tried to have you and your family killed.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. You can't pretend on camera that a guy's a nice guy and you're going to protect him in front of federal investigators if he's tried to kill you and your family, as Donald Trump tried to do with Mike Pence and Mike Pence's family. And Mike Pence said that himself on Saturday night. So why do you pull your punches against that guy?